The Soviet Union is a funny thing. While some idealize it and meet the old days, others claim millions innocently sent to camps and rejoice at the collapse of a never huge state. But what is the truth, and most importantly, what would be happened if the USSR hadn't collapsed? Dozens of dissertations and scientific papers have been written on this topic, but in fact the brief and accessible essence can be summarized in a few minutes of video. Let's start with the main thing, the people. According to the referendum of 1991, 77% of the inhabitants of the USSR voted in the favor of preserving the Union, and the referendum was very powerful. Almost 150 million people participated in it. It created a funny paradox, because in fact its result is more important than the instruction of any of the presidents. And the rulers of Russia, Ukraine and other countries had to work hard to recognize the results as illegal. This vote is often relied upon by many fans of the USSR. However, there are a few amendments that must be taken into account. First, the vote was not about preserving the Soviet Union in the same form. By voting for, people simultaneously voted both for the preservation of the USSR and for gaining independence specifically for their country. The referendum implied the formation of a new union. The Union of Sovereign State was to be the name of the renewed entity. Some parts of the country proclaimed their independence, and the state's leadership, headed by Gorbachev, tried to come up with anything to reform the federation and keep it within the same borders, even at the cost of liquidation the Communist Party at the head. The idea failed because Latvia and Estonia and other countries actually refused to implement it. The story of how the votes were obtained from there is rather strange. The events of the 1990s were a stage of agony. To understand what the world would have been like if the USSR had survived, we need to look more closely at the causes of the collapse, of which there are many. There are a few credible, independent and objective sources to believe. The newspapers didn't mention catastrophes even at the level of Chernobyl, and there was still the sinking of the Admiral Nahimov, gas explosions and numerous aviation incidents. All these events were concealed, which couldn't but create an oppressive atmosphere in society and distrust of Soviet technology in general. The reason for this is the government policy of mass production. Manufacturers were not interested in the quality of goods. The party demanded quantity. Since 1953, in the USSR, the plan for the evaluation of enterprises didn't focus on quality, only volumes were put on paper. The main mistake made by everyone who enters into an argument about the preservation of the USSR is communism. The country is considered a communist state, but in reality it is not. The USSR was a feudal empire with a clear ruling class. The nomenclatura, that is officials, army, bureaucrats, those who ruled the country and was in different environment. Look at the signboard of the Soviet store Berezka. Do you know that ordinary workers were not allowed to go there, but inside you could freely buy a Mars bar, Ferrero candy and any capitalist products? In fact, this is what the people who made myth about the healthiest Soviet products were eating. Supporters of the Soviet Union will start pouring facts and arguments against it. But there is one point that describes the situation best of all. After World War II, Germany was divided into several parts, but the Germans wanted to be a unified state and tore down the Berlin Wall at the first opportunity, while at the same time almost all of Eastern Europe was under the influence of the USSR. But when Gorbachev issued a decree to stop interfering in the affairs of other countries, magic happened. In 1989, the communists were ousted in Czechoslovakia, in 1990 in Poland, and almost all the countries in the camp instantly became democratic. People didn't like the current system, which was supported by the army and total censorship. In discussing what the world would have been like if the USSR had survived, we need to start from several time points. First, in 1991, after the referendum, the unity of the Union is held together by force. Democrats and supporters of independence are liquidated by the KGB and the Soviet Union returns. What would have changed with this outcome? Nothing. Add to the current situation the complete inability to get out of the country, get foreign products and learn truthful information from the media. Let us return to the beginning of Mr. Gorbachev's rule. In general, he conceived the reform perestroika. Everything looked great on paper: freedom of speech, transition to a market economy, fair elections. But it was realized as badly as possible. Instead of glasnost, people got Chernobyl. Instead of market economy, food on cars. And instead of fair elections, numerous riots and appearance of strange politicians. The nomenclatura didn't want to lose its privileged status and did everything to preserve it. But if the Union had really changed as it looked on paper, the situation would have turned out to be more than funny, because the closest analog of the final state according to Gorbachev's plans is the USA, and each state has its own laws. Approximately such a structure was planned in the Union of Sovereign States. Everyone does what he wants, formally obeying a single center. The trouble is that the USSR top brass didn't want to lose power. But if Gorbachev's perestroika had been adequate, the world would have been a funny place. Many blame the US for hybrid warfare and imposing its values. But what prevented the USSR from doing the same? Only the lack of real competitors to Western cars, movies, jeans, and many other things, and most importantly the same powerful advertising of these products. If there was an opportunity to do business without kickbacks and theft, then the still mighty production base of the USSR would definitely do something good. A great example is China. They also copied Western developments for a long time, but in the end they started to produce decent analogs of Western products, which many people use even in the USA. It's just that perestroika in China was carried out differently, raping not the people but the officials. Thus, there are two versions of the surviving USSR. Under the first one, people would dream of foreign kitchen sets, watching the children of officials eating Kinder Surprises from stores for the privileged. But under the second, the Union of Independent States was taking the difficult but quite realizable path of its own way with its iPhones and Mercedes. Guys, thanks for watching, please subscribe to the channel and like this video, and see you in the next video.